Hi friends. Please subscribe and help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. Thank you. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's go. When Sam checked his watch one last time, it was nearly 10 o'clock. He caught his reflection in the hallway mirror and offered a quick, tight smile while adjusting the lapels of his charcoal blazer. Outside, the New England evening had settled into a deep, biting chill, and the quiet streets of Greenwich were filled only with a distant hum of high-end SUVs passing by. Tonight was a big deal. His buddy Owen, a friend since their freshman year of college, had finally landed that senior vice president position he'd been chasing for years. Sam knew this night was a milestone, and there was no way he was going to miss the chance to celebrate his oldest friend's success. "I'm going to be running a bit behind," Owen had told him over the phone that morning. "Laura will be at the house early to give the caterers a hand. Get there whenever you can and help her with the last-minute setup, and I'll handle the tail end of the surprise." Laura, Sam's wife, had always been the one to live for these moments. She had a knack for orchestrating the kind of gram-worthy surprises and elaborate parties that their entire social circle would talk about for months. Sam used to joke that she didn't just host events, she poured her entire soul and every ounce of her passion into every centerpiece and curated playlist. He hadn't said anything at the time, but when Shed specifically asked him to show up a little later than planned to make a grand entrance, it had struck him as a bit off. Still, he brushed the feeling aside. He loved the way she turned ordinary milestones into full-blown productions. By the time he pulled his Ford into the driveway, the party was already in full swing. Warm light spilled from the colonial-style windows onto the pavement, where rows of luxury sedans and European imports were parked along the curb. Through the open windows, the sound of loud laughter and the thumping bass of a top 40 playlist drifted out, creating an electric atmosphere of celebration. He stepped out of the car and started toward the front door, but a sudden, inexplicable heavy feeling in his chest made him slow his pace. She wasn't there. Usually, Laura would be right in the thick of it, the life of the party, but as he scanned the crowded living room, his wife was nowhere to be found. It was weird. Sam tried to catch her eye across the sea of cocktail dresses and tailored suits, but nobody seemed to notice him walking in. He spotted a few familiar faces and exchanged quick nods with some colleagues from the downtown office, but something in the air felt shifted. A guy in his early 30s with tired eyes and a strangely blank expression approached Sam. He didn't know the man well, just one of Owen's friends had met at a couple of Super Bowl parties and backyard barbecues. The guy looked completely out of his element. There was something in his gaze that was too guarded, almost guilty. "Laura's upstairs," the man said quietly, barely nodding toward the grand staircase. You might want to head up there." A faint sense of dread began to crawl up Sam's spine, turning into a sharp, icy chill. Why was this guy, someone he barely had a connection with, being so cautious? Why the look of pity in his eyes? Sam forced himself to maintain a polite smile and gave a stiff nod. "She's probably just handling some logistical stuff." "I'll go find her," Sam replied, his voice tight as he struggled to hide the rising panic in his gut. With every step he took up the carpeted stairs, the world around him seemed to grow muffled and surreal. At first, he tried to convince himself there was a logical explanation, that Laura was just rushing to fix a dress or settling a bill with the staff. But as he reached the upstairs landing, the air felt thick, almost suffocating. He came to a dead stop when he saw the door to one of the guest rooms standing slightly ajar. From behind it, he could hear the distinct sound of hushed laughter and a low, intimate whisper. He took a final step and pushed the door open. She was right there. The moment Sam saw her, his entire world tilted on its axis. Laura was sitting on the edge of the bed with a man Sam only recognized in passing, someone had maybe spent 5 minutes talking to in his entire life. They were positioned close together, frozen by the sudden violent tension that flooded the room, looking like they had just been caught in the middle of something forbidden. Laura scrambled to pull away from him, her eyes darting toward the floor as she tried to stand up. The man, looking just as shaken as she was, stood up and immediately walked toward the window, putting his back to the room. Laura couldn't even hide the raw shock on her face. Her eyes were wide, her skin had gone pale as a sheet, and she pressed her lips together as if she were trying to physically hold back a scream. But not a single word came out. Sam felt his stomach twist into a hard, painful knot. It was a physical blow to the chest. He knew exactly what he was looking at. He didn't yell. He didn't cause a scene. He just stood there in the doorway, paralyzed, unsure of how to process the wreckage in front of him. He couldn't take his eyes off her, off the woman he thought he knew, and the reality of what she'd just done. Laura didn't move. She couldn't even bring herself to look in his direction. The man by the window stood like a statue, shoulders slumped, clearly lost on what to do next. There were no excuses, no explanations, just a deafening, hollow silence. Sam knew right then that there weren't enough words in the world to fix what had just happened. He didn't say a thing. He didn't ask why, he didn't scream, and he didn't try to understand. He simply turned around and walked out. Sam moved through the house like a ghost, the very floorboards feeling foreign beneath his feet. All he could see behind his eyes was the look on her face. Her silence. He didn't hear the music or the laughter anymore as he headed for the exit. Something deep inside him had simply snapped. He stepped out into the dark Connecticut night, and the freezing air cut right through him to the bone. The next morning came with a heavy, suffocating weight. Sam sat at the kitchen island, trying to force down a piece of dry toast that tasted like cardboard. Laura hadn't come to the master bedroom that morning. He'd heard her moving around in the guest suite across the hall, but he couldn't bring himself to go anywhere near her. When Laura finally walked into the kitchen, he didn't even turn his head. She looked exactly like she had the night before, yet she felt like a complete stranger. His gaze brushed over her face, but didn't linger. He knew she was hurting, but he couldn't feel anything for her. All he felt was a cold, numbing detachment. Laura stood in the doorway, clearly at a loss for where to begin. She looked like she was waiting for an explosion, but she couldn't find the words to even begin to justify herself. She walked toward the counter and reached for a coffee mug, but she froze when she saw the way Sam's jaw was set. "Sam, please talk to me." Her voice was barely a whisper, trembling with a fragile kind of resolve. She wasn't making excuses or trying to shift the blame. She was just looking for a crack in the wall. Sam said nothing. He walked over to the window, staring out at the empty backyard where the grass was still wet from the overnight rain. He kept his mouth shut, but his silence was more cutting than any shouting match could have been. Laura stepped closer, standing right beside him, but even her touch felt cold and entirely out of place. She tried to catch his eye, but he stared straight ahead. I know you won't forgive me, Sam. I know I've blown everything up, but I am so sorry. All I can say is that I was stupid. I wasn't thinking, I wasn't feeling." Her voice trailed off, growing weaker with every word. Sam squeezed his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. His fingers began to ache from the pressure. He turned around, but he still wouldn't look at her. "You weren't thinking? Seriously? You weren't thinking when you were with him?" His voice broke, and he went silent. He couldn't speak without feeling the pain rip through him from the inside out. He kept seeing the image of them in that guest room, the expression on her face when she realized he was standing there. It all came rushing back with a fresh, agonizing force. Laura tried to take a step toward him, her hand reaching out, but Sam shot his hand up like a barrier, stopping her in her tracks. He could practically hear her heart hammering against her ribs. She was desperate to do something, to say the one magic phrase that would reel him back in, but her words were hitting a brick wall. "I just can't," Sam said, his voice low and gravelly, almost like he was talking to himself. "I can't trust a single word that comes out of your mouth anymore, Laura." She gripped the edge of the granite kitchen island, her knuckles white as she tried to keep from collapsing. She could feel her entire world, the life they'd spent years building in this zip code, dissolving in real time. She couldn't wrap her head around how everything could go up in flames in a single night. What was she supposed to do to fix this? She had no clue. "Don't you even want to hear how it happened? Why it happened?" she asked, her words echoing through the cavernous room. She saw his face go pale for a split second, a flicker of pain, but he looked away again. "What am I supposed to hear, Laura? Your excuses? Your reasons?" Sam's voice was as sharp as a steak knife. The words cut deep, and he honestly didn't know where he was finding the strength to say them. "You haven't even apologized for what I saw with my own two eyes. You just walked in here expecting me to sit down and listen to your side of the story?" Tears were welling up in her eyes, but she fought them back. She didn't want to look like the victim here, but her face was twisted with genuine agony. "I don't even know what happened. I lost myself. I didn't think it would go this far. I thought it was just a moment, a stupid mistake. I never wanted to hurt you, Sam. You know I love you. You've always been my entire world." Her voice rose, hitting a desperate pitch, and she tried to close the gap between them, but he backed away again. "Don't you dare talk to me about love," Sam snapped, finally looking at her with eyes that felt like ice. "Your version of love isn't anything like what I signed up for. If you actually loved me, you never would have stepped foot in that guest room with him." Sam took a deep breath and started heading toward the door. "You made your choice, Laura. It was that easy for you. I don't care what you say now. You chose him." Laura stood there, paralyzed. She felt a cold sweat break out across her back, a dark, heavy weight filling the room like smoke. Every lie Shed told over the last few months flashed through her mind. Every excuse Shed practiced sounded like a hollow script. Every look Shed given him felt like a betrayal. "I can't live like this, Sam. I can't live knowing I've lost you. Please." Her voice was pure desperation now. He looked at her one last time, and there was nothing left in his eyes but a vast, empty void. He didn't answer. He just turned his back on her and walked out. Laura was left standing in the center of their designer kitchen, her hands clenched, watching her world crumble into dust. Sam didn't know exactly when Head made the final call. Maybe it was the moment he walked into that room the night before. All he knew was that he couldn't stand the sight of her. He couldn't listen to the sound of her voice. Less than 1 hour later, Laura was standing by the front door. She was holding a single designer suitcase, her movements heavy, as if she were carrying the weight of the entire world on her shoulders. She wouldn't meet his eyes, but Sam could see her hands shaking. She looked like she wanted to say something, some final plea, but the words died in her throat. The silence stretched out, long and painful. He expected more tears or a big scene, but all she did was whisper, I'm leaving, Sam." Her voice was unsteady, but she was holding back the sob. She took a step back, physically removing herself from his life. "You don't even want to hear me out. I get that," she said, her voice dropping even lower. There was no more fight left in her, just the same hollow emptiness Shed brought into the house. "You can't forgive me. I know." His chest tightened, and that cold, detached feeling washed over him again. But he didn't move. He didn't try to stop her. He just stood there, watching her like she was a stranger, like someone who didn't belong in his home anymore. "You're right," he said, and the words sounded thin, like an echo in a dark, empty basement. Laura didn't reply. She took another step back, her suitcase wheels clicking softly on the hardwood floor as she turned to go. Her movements were mechanical, drained of all life. Sam watched through the window as she walked to her car, put it in reverse, and drove down the long driveway. There was no relief. No sense of winning. Just a massive gaping hole where his life used to be. He went back inside, and it felt like a scene from a movie playing in slow motion. He could feel the wall between him and his past getting thicker and taller by the second. The man who used to believe in forever was now sitting alone in a house that felt like a museum. Had lost her, and he had no idea what the next move was. The decision was made, the bridge was burned. Now, all that was left was the reality of living with it. How do you live with something that doesn't exist anymore? 3 months crawled by after Laura moved out. 3 months, and Sam felt like he was finally starting to breathe again. He was the same guy, but at the same time, he was someone completely different. Time had become this strange, foggy thing that didn't lift. It just swallowed everything. He still woke up in the middle of the night, reaching for her, smelling the ghost of her perfume or hearing her footsteps on the stairs. Her voice still echoed in the hallways even when the house was silent. It was always there. It was permanent. He went to his office in downtown Manhattan like a zombie, just a guy going through the motions so he didn't lose his mind completely. He felt like the whole town of Greenwich was whispering about him, like every face he saw on the street was a mirror reflecting his own failure. His life felt gutted. It was a bizarre sensation. He was used to being alone now, but he wasn't used to this kind of quiet. He knew Head loved her once, knew Head wanted a future with her, but now that felt like a memory from a different person's life. Laura hadn't called. Sam didn't want her to. And yet, every morning when he checked his iPhone, there was this tiny traitorous spark of hope. Maybe Shed text? Maybe Shed try to explain one more time? but the screen stayed blank. He was learning how to live again, one day at a time. He started going for runs every morning. It wasn't about fitness or becoming some better version of himself. He didn't buy into that self-help garbage. He just wanted to feel his body working, to know he was still capable of moving forward even if his heart felt like lead. The very next morning, Sam called his real estate agent. "List the house," he said, not even hesitating. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay in that colonial graveyard another day. He needed to get out before the walls closed in for good. A few weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, he was sitting on the balcony of his new apartment, holding a mug of black coffee. He saw a woman walking by, the same one he had noticed once or twice while out on his morning runs. This time, she wasn't just passing through. She stopped and looked up. "Hey," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Did you get your run in today?" He nodded, a genuine smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He was at a loss for words. But when she sat down on the low wall nearby and started talking about how much she loved this neighborhood, and how her own life had done a total 180 over the last 12 months, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't love, and it wasn't even attraction yet, it was just something fresh. Something that felt like a future. They talked for over an hour. Sam felt the air around him lose its heaviness. And maybe, in the middle of that conversation, he realized his life was starting to mean something again. Not because of her, and not because of anyone else, but because of him. He didn't know what was coming down the road, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't a prisoner of his past anymore. Deep down, there was still a shadow. A shadow of the betrayal, a lingering ache from the mess Laura had made. But he knew that moving on was a choice he had to make every single day. And he was finally ready to make it. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.